What's good, YouTube? Welcome back to the Brown Gent. It's been a long time since I've wanted to make this video, and today I'm finally doing it, talking about why I'm so bullish on Kaspa. You've probably heard me talk about it in passing in our Web3 Secret Society meetings. If you're part of our private group, you've probably heard me talking about it as well during our AMAs and through some of our updates. Now, there's a lot of really bad people who also tend to push it, so it doesn't always get shown in the best limelight. And while you may hear ridiculous 100x price predictions, what I'm going to show you today is why, as ridiculous as that sounds, I truly think that there is a big chance that that is achievable with Kaspa. May not be this cycle, might take the next cycle, but there is so much potential in this project. So let's get into it. But before we do, just remember, I'm not a financial advisor. This is not financial advice. Please, as always, do your own research because I'm just a guy on YouTube. And if you wouldn't mind, make sure you follow me on my social media at the Brown Gent YT on Twitter. Check me out at the bank as well and see what I'm doing on my EVM wallet. And if you want extra coaching, guidance, and support, you can sort of use me for my services, the Web3 Secret Society. You can grandfather yourself in and also schedule a private call. Links to all of that are in the description below. So before we get into why Kaspa, let's talk about this concept of the blockchain trilemma. Now, one of the things I'm going to make sure I don't do in this video is go through a bunch of technical jargon, because I find that most people who are investing in cryptocurrency aren't science nerds. They're not interested in hearing a lot about what works. So I'm going to explain this at a grade 7 or grade 8 level. I'm not giving you more concepts than you truly need to understand, but I want to explain to you, and I want you to take away from this why Kaspa and why I think it has so much potential compared to what else is out there. So the blockchain trilemma basically refers to a trade-off that users will have to face on 3 aspects of blockchain technology. And those 3 aspects are security, the scalability, and decentralization. Now, I'm not going to cover current examples, but let's just go through exactly what a blockchain is, right? If you've seen already in the past, this is the most common concept of a blockchain. This is the meme pool or mempool on Bitcoin, which is blocks are in sequential order. And once one block is completed, then we get to the next block and so on and so on. And in that sense, you have a sort of distribution that manages a sort of decentralized network of computers across the world, right? So this is what we call a ledger or a blockchain. Now, the challenge is, because we truly want a decentralized system, we need to be able to take in all sorts of inputs across the world and not lose any of it, but also make sure that when we do it, it's of utmost security, which means that you can't have bad actors who are, let's say, for example, you got $100, you can't spend it twice, right? Because once you spent it, that's recorded. You can't do it again. There's no chance where you can spend $100 and put in another transaction to send the same $100 or spend the same $100 without one of them not going through. And this is the challenge that we have when you have a decentralized system. If you think about your typical, credit card, right? So in my wallet, I've got a bunch of credit cards. I'm going to cover this up. Basically, what happens through this is if I was to go into a chain and swipe this, all these transactions that would happen, they would get recorded, so I can't just go over my credit limit, for example. How do we solve for that in crypto? Well, we had to sort of solve for these 3 things. Now, in the past, it's been literally impossible, or so it seems, to get all 3. So what blockchains or certain projects have done is they've chosen to focus on two of the three and really not focus on the third because you just can't do it. So that is the trade-off we're talking about. Basically, a public blockchain can do two of the three, and then how they prioritize is how they segment their market. And that's why you may hear, well, this chain is really good for scalability, right? Or this chain is very good for security. There's a reason why we haven't talked about all three. So let's start with the first one, which is decentralization, a topic you always hear in the world of crypto. The idea is crypto is meant for the people, right? So because of that, we don't want one person or an organization having oversight onto it. So right now, the way decentralization works is it depends on how many miners you have in a sort of proof of work chain, number of validators you have in a proof of stake chain, the number of nodes, the people who are sort of jumping in, and how they're distributed across the world. As you've seen before, we've gotten scares when China was banning crypto. Oh my God, like imagine if all of our miners and network was sitting there, it would have a massive impact on the hash rate. Also, the diversity of node clients and the number of teams working on code improvement proposals. You want this spread out. You don't want this in one area, and you don't want one company owning a mass amount to the point where they can basically force consensus. So this is central to blockchain technology. If you, for example, had one company looking after it, that's like being in the real world with Visa. They get final say on everything that has to do with their payment service. So by having decentralization, you basically prevent control or you prevent censorship of the blockchain by a bad actor or one entity. Typically what happens is if you have a lot of people using your blockchain and you want consensus, well, it's likely going to take you or give you some challenges around scalability, because now you're like, well, the bigger the chain is, the more we have to consult with the entire chain. Without, in the past, Visa could just say, hey, here's what we're doing. That's all, and you can't do anything else. This is why when we think about the mempool for Bitcoin, these blocks take forever. The average block time is 11.2 minutes. And even though Bitcoin is so good at security, right, with its proof of work, it's so good at decentralization, the scalability is abhorrent. How many of you use Bitcoin on a daily basis to do transactions? It's not a pretty sight. So going back here, security is the next big component, which is let's prevent tampering by bad actors. If you're centralized, the security goes through one point of access because that's who gatekeeps the access to the system. This is sort of what will prevent the issue I mentioned before, which is double spending. In a decentralized system, in order to avoid or limit the double spending, you need to have cryptography and consensus mechanisms for all participants, so they all look at the most current state of the ledger without having any sort of coordination service at all. So I hope that makes sense. We've already talked about Bitcoin, but if you're a bad actor, you would need to have 51% of the total hash power to prevent some transactions from being included in a previously confirmed block, and then re-expand the energy used up till that point to change the records. It is literally impossible with a chain like Bitcoin. If you look at proof of stake, however, with Ethereum, you need consensus through the validators, and there are punishments too. So if you're a bad actor as a validator, you risk having your stake slashed by the blockchain. So security, very important. We want to make sure that our money is safe, that it's not able to be tampered by bad actors. And decentralization, we don't want, an impact in one location or by one actor causing massive consequences. Otherwise, if that was the case, we wouldn't invest in crypto the way we do today. So when we do that, there's a trade-off in the fact that if you have to have increased security, this is ensuring you have increased hash power in mining under proof of work consensus. And when you increase the costs, what happens is it squeezes out the little guys. The smaller, less efficient mining setups will have to exit. What does that do? Well, you're not as decentralized as you were before. And finally, the topic that everyone talks about, scalability. Think about this. How many of you guys like Solana? The reason you like Solana is it's so scalable. Yes, you have congestion issues here and there sometimes, but think about the 1 second transaction, like the literal fact that you can support so much transaction volume without getting capped and having such issues. We saw this with ETH. Think back to DeFi summer on ETH like a couple of years ago. People were paying $200 for gas on ETH mainnet, right? This is before like the ETH L2s have sort of come out and blob space and everything. But still, if we have the degradation, you have transactions taking so long and you have increased gas fees. People don't want to use it. So these are the trade-offs that matter, right? We want fast, and we don't want that to be compromised as the chain gets more adopted, because when you have something really good, everyone starts using it, right? Think about Sol. Think about Sol. Think about ETH. ETH mainnet, for example, showed it's not scalable. It just wasn't. They had to go to L2s to do that. Then they did sort of the blob space to help out quite a bit as well. But even still, we want decentralization, we want scalability, and we want security. So if we take a look at trade-offs, let's take an example here. So Ripple, XRP, focused on scalability and security, but they traded off on decentralization. And the reason for that is their network is more centralized than other blockchain networks, making it more susceptible to censorship, right? However, they were able to get across the scalability problem by adopting a different consensus mechanism. But this is the thing about Ripple. People view it as fast, but not decentralized. Compare that to Bitcoin and ETH, both with different mechanisms of working. With Bitcoin and ETH, you get decentralization and security at the cost of scalability. The more people use it, the less good the system is. So, and by the way, guys, I see you asking a ton of questions about random things. I'm not covering it here. We will cover it later. Please save that question for my next AMA video, okay? So Kaspa, on the one hand, it solves for this. How? It has all three. So let's get into how. If we go back to the mempool for Bitcoin, you remember how it uses the traditional blockchain of one after the other after the other. What happens in Kaspa, and I'm just going to hit the forward button, is what it does is it allows multiple blocks in parallel. So you see, it doesn't require just one block per sort of on the horizontal. You can literally have up to 32 blocks in parallel being created, and all of them refer back to the blocks that were in existence at the time it got mined. One of the things I do recommend, if you are interested in learning more about this Ghost DAG, which is this new blockchain mechanism, right? It's in the it was in the Nakamoto paper. It literally talks a lot about how this chain works and how block DAG is great. And Kaspa is the first chain to have block DAG. Now, I just want to cover a few things about Kaspa. So it is the fastest open source, decentralized, fully scalable layer 1 in the world. It's the first block DAG. And the beauty about this is we don't come in behind. And by that, what I mean is they did this such a fair way. If I go to Kaspa network, it is so important to talk about the decentralization with no allocations. Bitcoin was the last one to have this. You didn't have VCs who had a bunch of Bitcoin allocation. They did this the right way. For example, Ethereum, Solana, and others, they all have VCs who will benefit from big unlocks and everything else like that. And I want you to just pay attention to this. In an industry dominated by companies, VCs, and special interests that controlled massive pre-mined stakes, the decision-making power behind many decentralized networks, decentralized in quotes, it is unanimous that the scene has veered far off course from the principles of what made Bitcoin special. Over 8 years of theoretical research and development, Kaspa publicly launched in late 2021 from block 0 with 0 team allocation, 0 pre-sale, 0 pre-mined. What that means, it's literally built by pioneers, led by the people, for the people. And the beauty about this, the scalability, we'll talk about this in a second, but it can go to an estimated 32 blocks per second without compromising security or decentralization. It is absolutely insane. And when we look at solving the trilemma, for security, it's a generalization of the Nakamoto consensus, basically the extension of the Bitcoin security model, also known as the longest chain rule. It's the most oldest, secure, and integral core of the Kaspa methodology. It is secured via proof of work. Now, one thing I will say over here is it's important to understand the difference between proof of work and proof of stake. There's pros and cons here. The reason I like proof of work is it transforms energy into currency. This is what Bitcoin did. However, proof of stake, you just get a bunch more token creation, a lot more dilution. And when you do these things at no cost, it makes it so the token can be going up to $10,000. What is it truly worth? Yes, there are pros and cons. So proof of work is strong competition. You reward miners. You have a decentralized method for validation and strong security. And yes, you do have expensive equipment. Think how expensive Bitcoin mining is. High energy usage. We've heard people complain about Bitcoin sort of being bad for the environment. Slow transaction speed, higher transaction fees. But what if you could solve for that? What if you had fast transaction speed and low transaction fees, right? Proof of stake doesn't require expensive equipment, is fast and energy efficient, but it also allows people to hoard a bunch of tokens. It's unproven, and it has the influence of those who have larger stakes, and it requires an extensive investment up front, and then it dilutes people after the fact. So I really like proof of work when you can make it work, and that's what Kaspa is doing right here. So going back to this, the Kaspa generalizes NC onto a block DAG and references all mined blocks within the DAG structure. And what this does is it solves the orphan block problem, right? And orphan blocks are basically valid blocks that were created by miners that weren't recognized in the past. The way it works here is from the paper. Let me just go down here. Where is this? Let's go right here. You can see here that even though block F is created, it sort of knows what other things have come from it. So it is actually a very, very good, very good protocol to sort of making sure that we capture all of the orphan blocks. Decentralization, it is propagated by proof of work, low variance, single second block speeds going up to 32, which is why the scalability is so important. But we have a widespread network of nodes and a distribution of hash rate versus relying on a few mining pools. So the decision-making process is driven by the community and doesn't have a company pulling the strings, and there was no allocations, no pre-mine, etc. Now, the most important piece is great. It can be secure and it can be decentralized, but if it's not scalable, who cares, right? We see this, and that's probably why most people love using Sol. And here we have extremely high block rates and virtually instant transaction finality up to the limits of internet latency, right? It is the fastest proof of work cryptocurrency and will scale faster with that upcoming Rust rewrite, which is what will take it to the 32 blocks per second. So cannot wait for that. And Kaspa is doing quite well. I should refresh this page because I loaded this yesterday, but we're almost back to 0.17, 17 cents. You can see that we've been on a real upward trend here since September, actually even before then. it is very strong and it's been respecting this line over here. So we should get back up to the all-time high of 20.4 cents. Literally the only reason we dropped was because of the Japanese carried trade. So pretty cool. So how do you buy and store? Well, if you want to buy Kaspa from a centralized exchange, all you got to do is go to CoinMarketCap, check out Kaspa, same sort of site that I showed you earlier. But basically, under all or centralized exchange, you can see it's listed on Bybit, Gate, KuCoin, Mexi, BitGet, and many others. You can definitely buy them here. Just make sure that you're able to withdraw them to your wallet. The other option is if you want a decentralized exchange, my preference is RocketX. You can select any token you want and then select Kaspa. All you'll have to do is send the token that you selected to the address they provide, and they will ask you for a Kaspa network address to send the Kaspa token to. It is somewhat expensive depending on how much you do, but if you are doing it, it's like, for example, here it costs very little, but there are $10 fee or $12 fee. Typically you'll pay about 1% on these exchanges. Another thing you can do, so that's how you buy on centralized exchange and decentralized exchange. If you want to store Kaspa on your computer, I recommend using the Kasware wallet. I personally, as you know, like to have my stuff onto secure hardware wallet. So Kasware is fantastic. We'll talk about later how we mint KRC20 tokens. But if you want to also hold on to your Kaspa, you can get a Tangem. So I've done a video review of Tangem. I think it's fantastic. It holds my Kaspa tokens. So that's what I would do if I were you. You could also find some other hardware wallets, but I think Tangem and OneKey are probably the best. And if you want a coupon code, you can check the description below. Also, if you want a more in-depth wallet setup and funding guide, I've covered this in a video 2 months ago, so definitely check it out. I hope you found this video somewhat helpful on why I truly believe that Kaspa has a lot of potential. As a disclaimer, I got into Kaspa around an average price of 12 cents. So I'm up about 30 to 40% on my position. I'm still adding to it at these prices because I believe we will go over $1, maybe a couple dollars in this cycle. But remember, not financial advice. Please do your own research. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, do me a favor, hit the like button, share the video, subscribe to the channel. Thanks so much for watching. And until next time, I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.